need for that. They were being, they were going through that entire process using Google Gemini to walk them through. So here's something in real world, taking this abandoned shopping center, turning it into a mixed use neighborhood, all with the help of Gemini. So you still have those wow moments. At the same time, just a couple of days ago, I was with the Arizona Association of Economic Developers, and some of those concerns about the data sovereignty. For those of us who are working near or with some of our you know native tribes and things like that, there's a huge concern for data sovereignty and what does that look like. And so those are some things that we're trying to wrestle through. And obviously, it's a little unique on if you're a tribal community as opposed to a typical city. Maybe you don't have the same levels of concern, but I think there's a lot that we can learn from our tribal partners on data sovereignty and what it means to protect data and what that looks like and why that's important and how to do that. So some of the same challenges, some of the same hopes we had back in the beginning, the same challenges are occurring still today. Not sure we have necessarily solved a lot of the ethical and governance challenges. I think if anything, maybe become more and more clear and more we've we've realized the importance of ethical AI and responsible AI. The more we get to leveraging it, and the more we see the implications of AI. And so you think of kind of how this is all led from the very beginning of ChatGPT, the kind of the problems that preset ChatGPT. I'd say ChatGPT as kind of the genesis of generative AI, broadly speaking. But you see how we first reacted to this, and then kind of what their hopes and dreams of, and that's called kind of led us to where we are here today with AI in local government. And one of the things I think it's important to understand is to think through how AI and how this whole process, this whole journey that we've been on the last, I guess going on, we're in our fourth year now of this process, how this has changed what it means to be a leader in local government, like, and how AI has challenged us and how AI has changed the definition of what leadership means, right? Because it's very different to be a leader of human beings, and probably should be, than a leader of AI agents, right? It's almost a different world there. And so we think, okay, how has AI changed how we show up as a leader? How has it changed our expectations of work being done? How has it changed our expectations of what is acceptable in terms of the content that's produced, and what is professional content? How has it changed our perspective on how we prepare for things, how we don't prepare for things? One of the reasons why I tell people about using AI in local government is, whether or not you and your city staff and your organization uses AI is somewhat interesting to me. But the real interesting thing is, what are you going to do when someone walks into your council chambers on a council meeting and they show up at your call to public, and in those 3 minutes, give or take, of your call to public, they pull out Google Gemini or Perplexity and say, hey, according to Google Gemini, here is all the problems with your deployment model for your fire department, or here's why I think that your sidewalks are not ADA compliant because Google Gemini says XYZ. Are we ready for that type of interaction? What are we gonna, how do you counter that? What do you say? Do you believe that? Do you not believe that? What do you do with that? And so it's a lot of times it's thinking through, okay, what does it mean for our residents to have AI, and what does it mean for their expectations of how things are accomplished, how information is passed to them, and what does it mean to have an AI ready organization as a leadership team and as a leader of local government? What does it mean to be AI AI ready? So with all of that in mind, as I'm kind of like thinking through, okay, what does it look like? How do we get there? What does it mean to what does it mean to be a leader in local government with AI? What does that look like? I wanted to show you a couple things that I'm doing right now, and hopefully inspire you to kind of think through more practically what AI might mean for your organization, what this looks like. So I'm going to share my screen here. And one of the things I've done here is I've actually I'm on a AI fast, so to speak. It's not really a fast. I couldn't stay away from AI for too long, but I'm on a AI. I've canceled my ChatGPT subscription for 30 days. I am going no ChatGPT, and just to try to learn other AI tools that are out there to try to see how what it means to be a user again and learn new things again, as opposed to just expecting things. So it's been really interesting to use Gemini. I can tell you that Gemini is not a great writer. It's not very good at writing things. I've much preferred Claude and ChatGPT to writing, but it's been fun to try to see how these different things come about. So, what I want to show you is just some of the ways in which, again, how residents are going to be interacting with AI, and then maybe what that means for you and your city, what that might look like. So, I'm going to go here into Ask Gemini, and I know we have a lot of different folks from the Texas region here in the call normally. So I'm going to say, please give me a deep dive on the economic profile or the city of McKinney, Texas. I am a local government professional who is interested in learning more about McKinney. I'm going to change local government professional here to I am a local resident. I'll change that to a new local resident. Okay. So what's going to happen here? It's going to go through, and again, we've all seen these things before, right? We've seen what this can look like and how easy it is to put together, and what this this whole thing here. We've all seen very, very similar things. But again, but imagine, all right, imagine what this means now if they have this information, what it means for them to walk into a call the public and what that looks like and what it looks like in a call the public to have that information. So here we have all this different local economic strategy, cost of living breakdown, game changing developments. And I'm going to take this right here, cost of living breakdown, and say, can you give me more on the cost of living and explain why the taxes in McKinney and fees are so high? And I don't know if they are or not. I'm assuming they're probably, if you're in McKinney, I'm not trying to pick on you at all. I'm going to assume that they are probably reasonable for the area and probably market to the area. I'm also going to assume too that everyone who pays those taxes and fees thinks that they are significant and high, because it's typically what we do. They might be market, but we all like to think that they are higher than they probably are. So again, you're thinking this from the perspective of, okay, local resident wants to make a call to public based on the taxes and fees for, maybe we're looking at redoing a increasing the uh, water rates for whatever reason. Maybe they're below market and we want to bring them to market. Maybe we want to make sure that we are covering our costs as best as possible, that we can continue value and providing valuable service to our residents. And so there we go. So here you have more information here. Why it feels so high. The school elephant, 6% of your tax bill goes to school district. Valuation gap. You might see the city council brag about lowering the tax rate, which they did slightly for 2026. However, because property values in McKinney rose by around 9%, your bill will actually go up. So here you have all this information, again, at the tip of your residents' fingertips. And what do we do with that? Another thing too you can see too is very similar to this is I'm going to go to Google, regular Google, and there's this little button right here called AI mode. So AI mode, there's different options here. You can do auto or you can do advanced or pro. I'm going to click on pro. I'm going to say, I'm a resident of McKinney, Texas. Can you please explain how city revenues and taxes work? I'm just going to think through, and this is something that everyone now has access to, right? So before I was in Gemini, and that was a cool, pretty cool feature, and I'm paying for some of those features in Gemini, with a subscription to the program or to the platform. This is something that everyone has access to, and so here we go. Here's the information here, the tax dollar where it goes to, and I don't know whether or not this chart right here um, is accurate or not, right? I don't know this to be, I don't know 100% for sure if it's accurate or not. It could or could not be. But the other thing is too is your residents also may not know for sure whether or not it's accurate or not. And so you can imagine, all right, um, if you're McKinney and you're the school district, you might have a different reaction and say this if this piece of the pie is significantly less, or what it means for this piece of the pie to be this significant. That may make total sense. It just depends on how we approach the conversation, right? It doesn't necessarily mean it's right or wrong, good or bad. Uh, but you can see how this could be portrayed in maybe less than favorable ways at a school district meeting or things like that if we're not aware of what's out there, not aware of what the information is. And so you can see, like for this guy right here, the 2026 rates, we can click the link here, and here's all the different sites that it's going to. And we can see, okay, hey, is this 65% there? See McKinney, 23%, Collin County, 8%, Collin College, 4%. And so you can see here, okay, that's somewhat similar to what we're seeing here in the chart. Or the sales tax breakdown. Say if Texas gets 6.25, City General Fund 1%, Economic Development Corp or the MEDC gets 5% or half percent, and then the Community Development Corp gets another 0.5% as well too. And again, whether or not it's true or not is almost irrelevant to the conversation because once it's out here, it's we know how hard it is once something is already on social media, once something is already into the real, the internet, how hard it can be to change those narratives, how hard it can be to uh, to shift the focus, to go from hey, don't believe this on Google. This is, and it almost seems a little bit more in a way. It's even harder because there's some on Google Gemini right here, right? There is there's a thought and there's a perspective that it's AI, and so it maybe shouldn't be trusted as much, right? And so there's a little bit of hesitancy about the trust level for this information. When I'm here on Google, there's a higher level of trust. People tend to, for most part, they uh, tend to think of Google as a higher value there. So I want to share kind of where things are going with AI, why I think it's important to think through from where we're at now to where we are going, what that looks like going forward. And I see also in the chat, I see that my co-conspirator Robert has joined the chat here. As soon as Robert gets on um, the email on the call here. Maybe I have a couple of questions for him. But I'm curious if I could have Hassan, if I could ask you a couple of questions too, just kind of give your perspective as a futurist, as someone who is thinking about the future of local government and things like that. I'd love to pick your brain a couple of things, kind of set the stage of where AI is in the beginning, how we've kind of went from AI being this really cool, new, shiny new tool to maybe the trough of disillusionment kind of setting in a little bit here, it feels like. We're not quite seeing the same highs we used to see with the newest GPTs, the newest Gemini models. It's not quite as advanced or not quite as a flash in the pants we see before. So curious from your perspective, um, what what are some of the concerns or expectations that need to be managed as you look across local government? What are some of those concerns and expectations as we go into 2026, a year of agentic AI, I think? What are some of those concerns and expectations that might need to be managed? What can we learn from the past couple of years of more traditional generative AI?
Yeah, thanks, Micah. I think I love the way that you framed this story around kind of the promise of AI when it was kind of first bubbling up, right? Um, and at least the way I interpreted that promise, I'd be curious what your interpretation is that, for problems that have a solution, right? Like really good ways of actually solving that problem so that it doesn't reoccur. That's what AI is really good for, like complicated contexts, if you
Mhm.
will, right? Like heart surgery, like checklists, like it can increase our efficiency because it can basically automate that, right?
Yeah,
Um, and to me, that was the promise of AI. And I think to some extent it's done that,
yeah,
right? Depending on deployment. Like I'm always every time we talk about TOG, I'm always floored by their use of AI to spot kind of blight violations, right?
yeah,
And being able like that kind of like visual spotting using AI is really compelling. So I think it has delivered on that. And I also think it's amplified kind of the impact of the complex problems. Like when you trying to put a circle in a square hole,
hmm,
right? That doesn't
hmm,
fit. And so
yeah,
having this kind of mindset of, if we just throw AI at this complex problem that changes when we try to intervene, right? Just by trying to solve the problem, we change the problem,
yeah.
right? Then we're starting to see more challenges, right? And I think that's part of why we're in that trough of disillusionment after all this time.
I'm
And I
curious on this
think,
too. Haas, I'm curious on when you mentioned the complex problems, something that you mentioned there kind of tricked prompt my brain to think about is I talked to a lot of people that love using AI to just to help them articulate a problem better, right? Or things like that. Do you think there's still a value maybe of using AI not necessarily to solve the complex problems, but to maybe refine and better define what those complex problems actually are? Do you think that's something that we're missing at all when it comes to these complex ones?
yeah, I mean, I think it it to the extent that it helps shift our thinking, then it's helpful. However, I don't think it's a replacement for lived experience,
Yeah,
right? Like we still need to go out and ask, and that's where the real learning is. AI is not trained on that neighbor, that resident who's coming into that public meeting and asking and very concerned, right, about the cost of living, right?
yeah,
And I see Robert's here, so I'm happy to transition, but what I would, kind of another kind of reframe around that is AI has enabled like concerned residents to really engage in a more informed way, right? So in some ways, it's increasing access to be able to answer the important questions, right? Regardless of whether or not like the data is like valid or useful, right? Like someone was
yeah.
moved and inspired to be like, hey, like I can have a little bit of visibility into this. Can you tell me more? Right. So I think that's an interesting shift to how AI has impacted leadership, what leadership means, right? It's much more relational, more so than it is productivity driven, right? Like how effective am I at getting things done? Like I think that's starting to lose fit over time. So
Yeah. I want to bring and stay on here too, Hassan, but I want to bring Robert in for a second. And Robert, you're in a unique position. You're the director of a council of governments in the upper coastal plains of North Carolina. So how how has AI and how has that shifted and changed your what it means to be a leader, what it means to be a cog director, what it means to be a municipal executive? How has that shifted and changed for you? And what are some of those lessons that you're taking forward into 2026?
Well, getting used to AI, I think it's a constant learning curve for one. Um, but look, it's a very transformative. When I think about how we were doing stuff a couple of years ago versus how we're beginning to do things now with all the different AI tools and how much smarter they are and helpful they are and the more things that they can do, um, look, if your employees know how to use it, you're getting a productivity boost really across the board. The average the average proficient AI user is freeing up at least 3 hours a week by using AI to help augment their daily work. And
Yeah,
so, when you think about that, um, uh, it frees up staff capacity to do other things. But from a leader standpoint, AI is new. There's a lot of people in the public sector that have not. Um, uh, I would say the short version is less than 10% of the public sector has implemented anything, and there's about 60 to 70% who are thinking about trying to implement stuff, but they don't know where to start, where to go, what to use, or how to train. And so as a COG director, I'm working with my member governments to help them understand what AI is and how to safely use it. I'm doing
yeah,
a executive leadership training on Friday, matter of fact, for one of my counties. And then we're going to bring them into our AI regional AI platform.
yeah. So another question too. So Robert, something you mentioned was interesting is you talk about how AI can be I'm gonna use a military phrase, a force multiplier for an organization. Um, I think this is interesting too. Is how many? Give me a sense of how big is your team at the at UpCog? How what's your team size? I think this is super interesting as well too.
Well, I'm in a rural, small metro cog. So for the programs that we have, yeah, about 35 staff, various contractors. I mean, there's things that we could do in-house, but it's more efficient to
Yeah,
contract out. But
yeah.
we contract out most of our things, but essentially about 35 programmatic admin staff, planners, um, so on and so forth.
So the reason why I asked that is because I want to show that hey, you're working closely with your team, right? This you're not some massive cog director that has you're probably seeing all 30 plus people on a daily basis and interacting with them. You know them, you know their spouses' names, probably know their type of dog they have. Like you're this is a close a close knit group of team members, and so with that in mind, I'm curious about is what type of push when you going back, if you remember back to first launching and talking about AI in your organization, what was some of the pushback you got? How did you lead through that? Because you can't just you can't just ignore that because again, these are the folks that are going to be at your kids' baptisms. They're going to be at your you're going to see them in the grocery store. You can't escape, right? And so I think it's really important to understand like how did you manage that? What was some of those pushback you got, and what was it like to lead through that? What did it look like?
Well, the pushback is similar to what you still find today is you have employees who are like, I don't trust it. I don't want to use it. I don't think I need it. I don't see how it's going to be helpful to me. Why am I having to do this? So it's change management. People don't
Yeah,
like change. And so, if you remember, almost a year and a half ago now, I started those AI training cohorts within my region. And I made my staff go through the first three cohorts that I did. And so I have most of my staff trained. I'm about to do one more cohort to get the rest of them. But as they went through the training and then they saw, oh, this is how I can use it. This is how I'm supposed to talk to it. Here's how I work with my regular day-to-day documents to with AI. then people begin to get a different perspective. But it took, if you look at studies, and then I look at what I had to do, the leader has to be involved. AI is not something that you can just say, we're going to do it, get everybody a platform. You have to drive this as a leader, or it's going to be like any other tool any of us have ever experienced. Finance or some CEO gets it, they say we're going to use it, we all yawn and go, yeah, okay, and then that's it. And actually, when you look at the industry studies, that's where it's stalling on the vine out there right now. Is middle management is killing it, and you need to have buy-in from the top down on AI. You want ideas bubbling from the top up, from the bottom up, but if to make sure you're doing this as an agency, it takes leadership down, and because you
Yeah.
have to ensure we're going to do this and everybody gets that message. Now, you don't want to be like what we're seeing in some of the private sector stuff where you have these heavy mandates about use it or we're going to have to let people go.
Mhm.
But you do want to make sure that people understand we have it, we're going to use it, you're going to be trained, we're going to expect to get some things out of it. And what I don't want to hear is I don't want to hear any employee that's saying, I can't come up with any kind of use for why I should be using AI. Because if I hear that, then that's telling me that they either didn't take to the training or they're resisting some of the change. Because look, it's getting baked into our governmental tools. It's getting baked into our products. I mean, it's baked into Microsoft at this point. And
Mhm.
so there's really nowhere we're going to be able to turn within the next year where we're not going to be confronted with a regular tool or operating system that we use on a daily basis that doesn't have AI. And if you're not AI proficient, then you're not going to know how to talk to it right, or you're not going to recognize some things on what it's doing. And, it becomes harder to recognize, correct, move on, and so forth. But I mean, AI is going to be everywhere. And from a management standpoint, we're at a point now where, as a public sector manager, you are actually beginning to see more risk by doing nothing than to be actively training your team uh, on AI.
I'm
Um,
curious about something too, Robert. So as you mentioned training, there's an interesting conversation out in the webinar chat. I think people should definitely take a look at. It's a question between Dylan Welch put out there. So shout out to Dylan for this really interesting question about what other people are doing beyond just the simple text generation, right? The text or image generation. Dylan's asking about what's being done beyond that, the app writing, website scrubbing, and then Darcy Dylan responded something similar, how they're using it, Copilot Studio, they build an agent using Copilot Studio to answer employee questions about leave benefits. So I'm curious about is this, and we talked about training, but I don't want to just focus on the training piece just on its own. I think it's a component of it. I want to focus on the leadership part of it altogether. In your mind, Robert, as you've explored this, what what needs to be different, what's different and what stays the same as we move from the text generation, the generative AI, into the agentic AI piece of things? What stays the same and what's different of public sector leadership in this new AI age? And we'll kind of wrap up with this question. I think it's Dylan, great question, and Darcy, great response there. Just kind of trigger my brain on this topic.
well, I mean, if we look at, I mean, globally, you have 9% of the workforce that's proficient with AI right now, and that's a whole lot of people that aren't. But then you have others who are working in it, and look, the most common things that government is doing, and I've gone out to speak to several different states at this point, and I try to do surveys. And what I get back is consistent with some of the things that we see in the consultant reports. People are using it for ideas, brainstorming, draft generation, uh, media content, things like that, fact checking, editing. And so you don't need an advanced agent to do that. You can do that with regular Claude, Copilot, ChatGPT, some iteration, or you could do that with what we think of as a Google Gem or custom GPT or a Microsoft Copilot. Now, Microsoft Copilot likes to call their stuff agents, but what they really are is it's a custom GPT or a Google Gem. Just Microsoft terminology is all gummed up right now. But when you think about an agent, an agent has a brain, it's got a tool set, it can go and accomplish things and then either do it with or without human feedback.
Yeah.
And so most people are at a point where you just need Chat GPT or its equivalent, or what I think of as AI assistant or custom GPT. When we get into agents, real agents, the smartest model agents out there are only right 25% of the time. So and that's in a lab environment. Now, it's not that it's not smart, but if it has to do multiple stages and things over 10 minutes long, its accuracy goes way down.
Mm.
And then the other barrier that it runs into is, I mean, think about a lot of the government software systems that we deal with and the interface. And so an agent has to be trained on that interface to be accurate and to be accurate over time. And so from a true agent standpoint, we're a long way off before those things need to get let loose in the public sector, and they need to get way more accurate.
Yeah.
But there's people that will call something an agent and it's really not.
Yeah.
Um, so, but if you look at where people are, I think they need to be AI enabled. They need to have something like a Copilot or a Chat GPT or a Claude available. Local governments should look at creating some pre-trained uh, assistants, AI assistants that know how to do a particular job that can make employees more productive. And then an agent at this point, I know some governments have permitting agent processes out there and some other things like that. That's a very highly scripted agent for a specific use case, and
Mhm.
those are okay. But otherwise, the rest of these agents that have to do really broad things, they're just not ready for prime time yet.
So you're saying we should not download Moltbot or Claudebot to our terminals, our computers, is I think was what the takeaway here from Robert is. Uh, yeah, I think it's interesting, and I think it's interesting to see kind of where this evolves to over time. I think we're gonna get more and more clarity, and I think it's also where there's a question in the chat from Diane Stoddard about kind of where or what are some good training sessions and things like that, and they're in an organization about 275 employees, and first off, I would say a great place to start is SGR. I would reach out to the SGR team, reach out to Hassan, reach out to Mike Maury, the president of leadership and development there. I think they can point you in some really good directions for that. And I'd also say there's something we began the conversation. I'm going to end it the same way. We began the conversation talking about TLG, and again, this is not a plug for TLG. That was the previous webinar, but I think it's relevant. It's because we talk about AI adoption and AI learning. There's something about learning in community. And there's something about a network and a community of like minded individuals that I think is super, super powerful. I don't think it's an accident at all that I got my start talking about AI sitting in the conference room of the I can't remember the hotel in Kansas City was called, but I was at TLG talking with some people about AI, and that's how this whole thing kind of came about was from TLG. So uh, obviously sending 275 employees to TLG might be a little bit of a financial investment. Hey, if you could swing it, Diane, more power to you. But might be a little bit of a financial investment. But I do think that there's importance to connecting people together and connecting innovative thoughts together, right? Having to be able to pick the brain of Hassan or pick the brain of a Robert Hyatt and ask, hey, how are you approaching this problem? What are you learning? If there's one thing I learned about AI is that we are all trying to figure this out together. No one has like there's no set standard on any of this at all. So we'll try to figure this out together. And so doing it in a community of like-minded people with with the AFI, with the TLG, I think is super, super important as well too. For me, provide a lot of valuable for me at least. I can speak from my personal experience, and I would encourage folks who are exploring that to consider the same thing. But definitely want to encourage you if you're interested in AI training for you and your team, reach out to Mike Maury and the SGR team. I think they have some really great resources that can point you in some really good directions there. So with that, Robert, I want to thank you. I know we had some technical difficulties here, but I appreciate your patience. Appreciate you being able to hop on. Thank you, Hassan, for hopping on as well too, and for Mike and Lisa for everything you've done to put this webinar. Hopefully, it's of value. I love hearing stuff about how people are using AI. So please, Darcy, maybe send me a message. I want to learn more about the autonomous agent you're using for that Outlook inbox. Would love to hear more about that. If you don't mind, send me a message. Just love to pick your brain what you're doing there.
Thank you, Micah and Houseland. Great conversation. And Robert, man, you just added so much. We're gonna have to have you back at another a time. So we want to pick your brain more than we were able to today. But I love that you're doing these cohorts on AI because I think kind of to the point of what Mike is talking about, we all learn better together. And I really appreciate that. And we're anxious to hear more on that. You know, one of the questions that came up too was, and you sort of answered this, somebody asked how reliable is economic information provided by AI versus what you might find on the finance department's webpage. And, you know, you said it's probably not always accurate, right? So check, but verify, I think is the answer to that. And at the same time, it's going to get better and better, just like we've talked about before. And so, thanks so much. It's been a great conversation, and we would definitely want to learn more from you um, about what you're doing there, and also Darcy. I love seeing what's going on there with your organization. So, hope you've enjoyed being a part of this, and you'll get a link to see it so you can view it at your leisure. And thanks again, Halson and Lisa, for your work behind the scenes, and Mike as always. And